Welcome to another episode of the Jersey Podcast. I'm your host, Darian Kelly. Today, I have a very special guest, Andre Harakas. Andre is the CEO of All in Sports. Andre, thank you for coming on the show.
Absolutely, Darian. Thank you so much for having me, man.
Certainly, certainly. Well, just catch me up on just, I know that we were kind of talking offline just about, how the day has been for you, but catch me up, like how has the summer been for you so far?
Man, that's actually a great question because the summer has been crazy for us.
Wow.
To kind of dive into it pretty directly,
Mhm.
we kicked off a really large initiative pretty much at the beginning of the summer.
Right.
And what we did was, from a technology perspective, first I'll give a little bit of background on who we are,
Right.
if that's okay.
Yeah.
So at All In, we provide an all-in-one operating system for sports programs, specifically for coaches ranging from anywhere from middle school to the Division I level of sports. We have coaches all over the spectrum, and we're adding about 100 new programs a month. We have to be one of the fastest growing sports team platforms out there. And a big reason for that, and actually just started happening this summer. So
Wow.
this summer, we kicked off a brand new initiative to completely pull the sales rep out of how we go to market
Wow.
and specifically lean into PLG, product led growth, which has been primarily influenced by Silicon Valley, West Coast or East Coast startups, but not necessarily in the Midwest where we are. It's kind of a new thing. So we leaned into that pretty heavy this summer, and I've seen some awesome numbers and growth and things like that. So we're kind of in the middle of doing that and executing on that.
Yeah, absolutely. And talk a little bit about, because I know that for you, I was, doing my background, doing my homework on you. Talk about your earliest sports memories, because I know that you started out playing football. Is that correct? You're more of a
Mm.
football guy.
Yeah. So I'm originally an East Side of Indy kid. So East Side of Indy is kind of inner city ish of
Right.
Indianapolis, and went to obviously started playing football my middle school.
Right.
So I didn't start playing until I was in eighth grade, but played like in the street with all my buddies and stuff
Right.
like that. Coach said, "Hey, come out and play,"
Mm.
and so I went out and played. Seventh grade, I was defensive captain, so I had a knack for it always. I was a big kid, still a
Right.
big guy. Um, and but the first game of my eighth grade season, I tore
Right.
my ACL as like I
Wow.
don't even know, I was 13 years old.
Wow.
Which was interesting because like it set me back in so many ways, obviously from an athletic perspective, but it was the first time in my life I had ever experienced like having to work hard to get back in sports, especially at such a young age. I felt like it taught me a lot. So that would lead into me playing football in high school, starting varsity, being an all-state football player here in Indianapolis, and then getting a few scholarships to a couple of NAIA programs, Division II programs. Ultimately, chose to go to Indiana Wesleyan University, which is in Marion, Indiana,
Okay.
which is where I graduated from.
Nice, nice. And what was, I guess, for you, like, was entrepreneurship like the initial thing you thought of, like, as you were going through your college years? Like, take me through that process of like how you first kind of arrived at the concept of, all in essentially.
Yeah, I think that's a good question because I never thought of myself as an entrepreneur,
Mm.
right? Like growing up and like going to college, like I never thought I'm going to be an entrepreneur and start a business. It's not really where I was. To
Wow.
be completely honest, when we first kicked off at the time, ProBook Sports, now it's All In. I'll refer to it as All In the whole time.
Right.
Um, I didn't even understand, like I didn't even know to call myself a founder. So like I was so like absent of like any knowledge on this stuff,
Mm.
and which is kind of interesting. Like I didn't get into All In because I wanted to be an entrepreneur and wanted to find a problem.
Mm.
I got into All In because I had a problem and I wanted to build a solution. And
Mm.
that's really the difference when it comes to us and the team that we built. Um, so that I thought of the idea when I was a sophomore in college because I played football, had to manage being an athlete, being a first generation college student, trying to figure out the playbook.
Right.
I'm like, we got to figure out a way to put all this stuff together.
Right.
And that's where the idea was born in a music
Wow.
180 class when I wasn't paying any attention. And like, so it started there and then blossomed thereafter.
Yeah, absolutely. And me a little bit about my background as far as like sports, like I, played, football at the Division III level. Even though they say, D1, D2, D3, if you strapped on those, you strapped on those shoulder pads and you wore that helmet, like you were a player, you had a
Correct.
commitment. And so when you talk about having to manage all of that, it was a lot for me. It was a lot for me personally. Being able to, having, lifts at 6:30 or 5 a.m. runs, or so having to manage all of that was a lot. And I noticed that for some they thrived, and then others I felt like it wasn't just enough to just have a coach say, you got to do this, or you got to show up here, try to prep you on that mentality. I think it was more so integrating it into our daily lives and how we met. Like we lived by our email, everything was through an email system. We were on our phones. So I think having something to what, that solving that problem that you were saying, as far as managing everything is essential, because you don't want, even though managing your schedule and time is one thing, but you don't want to have to go out your way to do that throughout your day. You want to make that as accessible as possible.
Yeah, Darren, I think you hit around the head, and I've really thought about for a while on what is the real problem that we're solving.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Mm-hmm.
I think that we came out and it was more like I started obviously from the athlete's perspective,
Right.
right, and then I really started, and over time, of course, we really started to serve coaches because those were our main customers, those who
Right.
bought the product.
Right.
And I think that over time, what I realized what we really created was a true, do a comparison, like a Slack for sports teams.
Okay.
Like there's something intrinsically valuable about like having a communication tool that's specifically made for you,
Mm.
right? Like why don't businesses use GroupMe and why do they use Slack instead of GroupMe?
Right.
Right? It's more than just messaging. It's a way to facilitate everything that you do from a business perspective,
Right.
video, audio, connections, things like that on a daily basis. And that, I think, in large part, is what we made with All In. We essentially made the Slack for sports teams that's really designed for the like the sports team coach.
Absolutely. And talk to me a little bit about some of the lessons that you took from the game. Obviously, like you said, you had a major injury at 13. I can't imagine what that would be like for me. And I was, fortunate to not have any major injuries. I might have, tweaked my ankle here and there, but nothing like an ACL tear. Take me through, like, starting from then to when you finished your career playing football. What was those lessons that helped you or allowed you to be the entrepreneur that you are today?
Man, being an athlete is not that far off from being an entrepreneur.
Mm.
I think most athletes could do this game, could play this game, and that's what this thing is. It's a game. It's a game. Pitches are performances. Let's not get this twisted.
Right.
All that stuff is extremely real,
Right.
right? You need to execute at a high level. You need to hit certain goals, and if you're not the best, you don't get chosen, right? That's why the failure rate is very high. So I think that in a nutshell for my athletic career is what I took from that, and that's what's helped me so far. Just in like basic like blocking and tackling, like going through tough things, going through practices, doing stuff you don't want to do. Right. That is a lot of entrepreneurship. But I think specifically for me, Darian, it was all around the injuries and the process of like being the first. Like I used football to get to college. Right? I wasn't going to go to college if it wasn't for football, right. And so I had to use me to get to the place I needed to go. You know what I mean? And so that was obviously important. I think a lot of people do that too. Right. And then the injuries, and I think the perseverance piece, right? Like you're going to have setbacks. I didn't think about this as much like actively while I was going through it, but in entrepreneurship, you're going to have setbacks, right? You're going to have, you launch and all of a sudden, like not everyone's knocking on your door to come buy your product, believe it or not, kind of thing, right? And the same kind of thing exists. Like, sometimes you put in a lot of hard work, you get injured, you're literally back to square one. Right. So I think those are some of the main lessons I took away from being an athlete and then how that translated to me being an entrepreneur.
And also too, just prior to this, I was watching some of your previous podcasts, and you talked about the barriers as far as when you were forming your team, and you were within All In, you understood the business, but essentially the technology piece was like a hurdle for you. And I noticed that just in the sports tech realm, right, there are some people that enter that are more business minded, but they have to, there's a lot of like learning gaps within the technology. How were you able to, mentally, how were you able to combat and say, okay, this is something that is a challenge I need to address? And then how were you able to be humble enough to actually put a team together to solve those issues, from a technology side of things?
Sure. I think you're hitting on a deeper thing. And I think specifically around when you're building your founding team, we got a little bit lucky in that like the guys that I did this with were all very, very different from me. I would not be friends with Carter or Grant, both my co-founders, if it wasn't for this company. I'll tell you that right now. I love them to death, but we all say it all the time. We wouldn't be friends because we're so different. Right. I think that piece is really important. So like having people a part of your startup that are specifically strengths where you're weak. Right. Seems cliche, but it's super true. Right. Like if you have a team of linemen, you're not gonna have a good sports program. You gotta have a quarterback, lineman, running back, all that kind of stuff.
Absolutely.
And so in this case, it was all around. I didn't have any technical expertise. neither did either of my co-founders, but Graham was a graphic design major.
Mm.
And so at least we could execute on what it was supposed to look like and how it was supposed to function. We use Adobe XD, some people use Figma, what have you. And then I think the second part to that is once you've established that vision, went out there, tried to sell the images, right, get LOIs and things of that nature.
Right.
Finding the right development partner is extremely important because at first we did not have an excellent development partner. We certainly launched the MVP, but I think that whenever you are a technical founder
Right.
and you're wanting to execute on a technical product, it does take probably 2 times the amount of time, and you got to have a development group that's willing for you to be that involved 2 times the amount that a typical group would be involved because it's so important to execute on the technology vision if you're not a technical founder, if that makes sense. Like you got to spend more time with those developers if you're not a technical guy to get it right.
Absolutely. It's kind of like if, let's say you were, particularly playing like a different position, right? You might have switched to a new position. It's like you got to spend more time and work on things that are, maybe weaknesses versus things that you're already strong at. You know what
Correct.
I mean? It's kind of like if, you played D on the D line, correct?
So I played tight end.
Oh, you played tight end. Oh, excuse me.
Yeah.
So it's like, it would be like if, I guess, like if you were going from, I guess, tight end to, wide receiver, if you played, like if you were like a DN versus like, going from DN to playing outside backer. It's like,
right.
You have the skills there, but you gotta really, really, work on the things that you may not necessarily be good at and not really rely on, what your strengths are because you have to adapt a bit. And I think that, also too, another question is like a follow-up is, when, now that you kind of, you formed this team, how did you kind of handle, the growth that, that came with that? Like, how did you handle that growth and like that scale, when that happened? Because obviously there are different stages to building a company. But when you put that team together and you get that first, or you have that run, how do you handle that from when it wasn't as many, people picking up the phone or people, kind of, connecting with you on what you were building?
Yeah, I think that the phrase I like to use with the team, if you stay ready, you don't got to get ready.
Mm.
Uh, and so I think that's definitely how we operated for sure. Um, I know when we first launched, we would have loved for our phone to be ringing off the hook. That's for sure. So we were just we were kind of ready for it. But I think it's a couple of things really from a business perspective. Customer success, unbelievably important. I think that early on, when you're just trying to add customers and show week over week and month over month growth, like you add one person and like they fall to the back burner, then you're just trying to go get the next one. And then like a year later, like that person doesn't pay you again, or a month later, that person doesn't give you $30 again or something like that. Right. Like taking it like that when it comes to growth, and really being able to scale a business, the only way you can scale is if the same customers you added last month stick around 3 months later. Right. Or you're just adding more customers. And I think especially as a SaaS company, I think the biggest lesson we learned was customer success is paramount. Making sure people are successful on your platform, that is like a really, really good remedy for as you scale, making sure that you're in a good position, right? Because if people keep paying you, then you're good. If they stop, then obviously you're not. So,
And what are some of the things that, I guess, as a team, what do you all implement to continue to get that repeat business and create those strong relationships? Because like you said, a lot of it is predicated on, how many customers you retain. So what are those things that you implement from a strategy standpoint to keep, to keep everybody in line, or even to bring on new customers? Like what are those strategies that you implement?
sure. I'm going to 3 specific ones, how
Okay.
we actually did it. So if someone's listening to this and they actually want to take like the idea on how to do it potentially. One, brand, right? So, and what's that mean? All right. So we get a lot of customers through Twitter, right? So we engage, they're already engaged with us through a social media platform. And the more we engage on that platform, the more they see us every day, the more they're reminded of who we are and what we do. Brand's super duper important. Staying engaged, getting either that's through social media, email, constant email updates, whatever you need to kind of keep your product top of mind. That's number one for customer success. Number two for customer success is seeing the data on your users. So for like what's specifically important, what's your leading indicator for someone not to churn, right? What's that equation? If X user does Y action in L amount of days, then that person's less likely to churn. So for us, it's like if a coach adds their team within 2 weeks of the platform, they're way less likely to churn. So we look at our database and say, okay, 25 coaches only have one user on the team. We need to call 25 of those people, add their team. Now they're good. Now they don't churn. So I would say those are the three things that are the two main things that we did to make sure like are people using your product? Obviously, getting them to use it's obviously going to keep them as customers. And number two, making sure they really resonate with what you're doing from a brand perspective to get them to like kind of believe in it and talk about it. And all of a sudden you get the word of mouth piece as well.
Absolutely. And as far as, within those, I think that those three aspects, are key, right? Understanding your presence on social, being able to connect with the people that, being able to keep those relationships going, whether it's check-in call or check-in message. I think that, we often, or not we, but I think that we, some, individuals that are within the entrepreneur space or just people who are looking to be entrepreneurs, it's those little things that are often overlooked. I think that entrepreneurship is, in the grand scheme of things, people kind of overthink it, but I think it's predicated on the relationships and putting together like you said, a strategy to make sure that, the funnel is always there. So you're not starting, all over again. And so I think that's key. And I'm glad that you were able to kind of break that down. So and this is one of the things I wanted to touch on as well. So if I am a coach or an organization, I want to utilize the platform, how would I go about doing that?
It's really simple. You can go to allinteamsports.com. You click the get started button on the website. You'll fill out a form on who you are, set up your account. You'll complete your registration and then you're in. It'll take you about 2 minutes to get into the system. We're going to completely walk you through how to use it in the platform. So when it comes to like making sure your staff and you are up to date on like actually how to use this system, that happens pretty quickly. And then you can usually add your team within the first 24 hours, everybody get a message and things like that. And the reason that you're going to want to use it is if you have more than 3 apps that you're managing your team with, that doesn't need to be a thing anymore. If you're looking for athlete nutrition and mental wellness to be a part of your organization and your team's culture, that's another reason to use it. The last reason you should use it is because it's new and you check it out, see if you like it or not. You can cancel anytime.
Absolutely. So. Absolutely. And as far as, as far as the platform, is concerned, as you're building it, talk about, your impact. Like what were some of like the success stories or something that you were like, wow, I thought I had this idea, I brought it to life and it's amazing, like how it's impacting, fill in the blank. Like what was that? What is your impact that's been so far, as you've been on this journey? Like what has that been like?
Yeah, I think that the biggest thing for us, for me at least, in like at All In, our big thing is like we help teams build team culture. And that to me is really, really important. I think that is, especially for the coaches too, that we're partnered with, like that's so much of the experience of so many athletes, right? The team, how's the team feel? How am I like, it's one thing to like have individual moments, but like what my experience from freshman year to senior year was great. And like the fact that we can play a point in that in somebody's life, right? Like football was huge, college football for you and me was defining. Like if we can play like if we can have a hand in that, that really is something special. So I think that's like in a grand scheme of things, like being a part of that, being a facilitator of that whole process is really impactful in my opinion. I think the other piece is like the very small things, like you said, like athletes using All In to like reach out to their coach and like they need help, right? Or they're having mental health issues that day, or like, hey, coach, just want to let you know, like I'm getting my GPA up and I'm doing well, and he's able to respond. Like little things like that to facilitate that. That's just like, man, that's kind of cool. We made that.
Yeah, and I think that is key, the culture piece, because I look back on the teams or the times where I enjoyed playing sports the most. It was because my teammates, we ate together, we were in class together. We just, it's about that culture of like togetherness. And when you don't have that, or you don't have a means to connect everyone, because I think oftentimes like that was the biggest thing, was like, especially in college, like, it's, there's a team, but then everyone has their own kind of like lives outside of whatever sport they play or whatever they focus on. So it's sometimes kind of hard to get everyone together. When you have that culture and you have like a platform such as like All In that's helping to build and sustain that culture amongst, teams and with coaches, especially because, culture without great coaching, there is no culture, and vice versa. Like they go hand in hand. So I think that, I think that impact is key, because it's not only, creating success on the field. When you think about the experiences that athletes have when they understand what a good culture is, when they leave the playing field, and they go on to, pursue whatever endeavor they have, they take those lessons or they take those, what they learn, they're actually able to apply that in different areas, within their life, just, not even just from a business standpoint, but just, from life, just how to, be a
Sure.
team player, how to develop culture. So I think that that impact is really important.
Thank you.
And as far as, when you were, as you were, starting out, um, how did you, and I don't know if you had this experience, but like, did you ever feel like any like imposter syndrome or any like self-doubt at all? And like, how did you, get over that from a mental standpoint?
Yeah, I think that's the, hmm, of course,
Right,
like of course you're gonna feel that way.
right.
You're asking people to hand you hundreds of thousands of dollars, and you're supposed to
Right.
like know what to do with it, which like you do because you made a financial model, so therefore you know how to use it.
Mm,
I think that's one thing. I think another thing is like, you know, coming from a certain like socioeconomic background too, you once you really get into entrepreneurship and your business starts to work, you start to get that like successful,
mm,
right? And like now that you're successful, then like people have these certain like ideas on, like, oh, can I really be successful, right? Like, or like you always think like, oh, it's good right now, but it's going to
mm,
fail later. So right, it's
mm.
kind of like I'm always trying to survive, but like, dude, you're not surviving, you're thriving.
Right.
I think like coming from that background, kind of for me personally, understanding the difference between like, hey, Dre, you guys aren't surviving anymore at this point, you're thriving, and like you don't need to be constantly worried about like the ship falling apart, like it's going really really well.
Mm,
That for me was I think a thing. I don't know if that's imposter syndrome or not, just not being used to that level of success is something that was like real,
mm,
um, and it's just not something I grew up with. And I think the other piece is just like being confident in yourself, especially on pitches and like people asking you questions and thinking that like, oh, like someone else is smarter than me. It's like, no, just be you. Your
right.
idea is probably really, really good and you could probably
Right.
execute on it. So like you can do it. You know what I mean? So just kind of believe in yourself.
Yeah, and I noticed like that is you touched on something really important there as far as like if you don't know the answer to something, like it's okay to like to say like you don't know it. Cause I noticed like oftentimes, or at least my experience was just as an athlete, and like I've had times where like a coach will ask me a question about like a play or like what my assignment was, and like it'll be times where like I'll just freeze up and I'll just be like, well, and it's but at the same time, it's like building that confidence to understand like, hey, I don't know this. This isn't this isn't a portrayal of like of my character. It isn't like you don't have to take it so extreme. It's more
Sure.
so like maybe something I have to get better at, or I maybe have to figure that out and come back to you and get back to you on that. And it's nothing. I think that that's something that we, not even just, not even people that are just entrepreneurs, but just people in general. Like we sometimes suffer from like, oh, I don't know what they're gonna think if I don't know this answer. And it's like it could get cringy, because you think like, man, I'm not confident. It's like, no, you may not know it now, but you will know. And it's the belief that you'll get those answers and that you feel security in not knowing sometimes. And that's okay.
Exactly. No, I think 100,000%. I think, this entrepreneurship journey is definitely, it's a long one. I
Right.
think the average company takes 10 years to exit,
Right.
like you're going to get your PhD in this thing and you're going to have to start off in elementary school kind of deal.
Right.
Um, so I think like, it's just like strap in, get ready, and it's going to suck, but you're going to make it. So you're not going to know everything at first. I don't know everything right now.
Right.
I know the mistakes I've made and what I learned from it, but there's going to
Right.
be another 100,000 mistakes I make from now the next few years, and all that is okay, all in the pursuit of making it right.
Yep, absolutely. And on this journey, your entrepreneurial journey, was there any mentors or anyone that like, shared lessons with you that you were like, wow, I'm never gonna forget this, or this is something that, really like changed my outlook on, what I'm building? Like, what were those lessons that you received?
Yeah, I think that just for the people who are listening, I definitely had some people internally, but I relied on YouTube, still rely
Mm,
on YouTube, like for real.
YouTube University.
No, YouTube University is a thing. If you're not using it, you should. Um, I think that from a business perspective, I definitely listen to most, if not all, of the Y Combinator videos that are out there.
Okay.
Those are some of the smartest founders on the face of this planet,
Right.
and all their lessons are super knowledgeable. I would listen to a video by them and then immediately have like some actionable tasks I could go do to
Right.
make my business better.
Mhm.
I think from a personal perspective, I listen to a lot of like Jordan Peterson, more like purpose, mission, drive, like who am I, what's my purpose kind of thing.
Right.
I think he has an interesting perspective because he's not telling you what your purpose is; he's helping you discover what it is. Um,
Mm,
so JP was really, really good. And then I think just another business one I listened to is Saster. I think they do a lot on sales, which was really beneficial because, you know, that's early on. You don't think about sales, like how important it is really to hit those
Right.
KPIs. But once you hit sales numbers, it's just like things get a lot better.
Right.
So I think those three things were the main mentors that I had from YouTube.
Absolutely. And also too, when you look at, I always, that this is a question that I always like, it's one of those questions. It's like, I have to ask in every episode. I always bring up the Tom Brady reference, right? It's always he's not the fastest, he's not the strongest, he doesn't have the strongest arm. It's his habits that separate him, from everyone else. He just has better habits. So what are the habits that, for you as an entrepreneur, that have allowed to, that has, from your perspective, have led to your success up until this point?
I'd say my habits, man. I mean, um, so like today, for example, wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning every day. Like to hit the gym first thing, think through problems, think through solutions, personal stuff, what have you. And then I think like outside of that, just like, because like I said, it is a long haul. And so
Mm,
obviously I could go through and say like, I wake up at 4 a.m. Like, sure, I do all those kind of things, but I don't always do those things. So
mm.
like definitely is off and on. Like it's like life. Like I haven't woke up at 4 o'clock every single day for the past 4 years. I can tell you that, but it's not true.
Right. Yeah.
I sleep, like so,
Like you're a human, like
yeah, like I slept sometimes. I did. I'm not gonna lie. I did it. I swear. But I would say just the biggest thing was constantly be thinking and learning. That's
Mm,
something that I think did separate what I was doing from my peers. Maybe that was an accelerator that I was a part of or something like that. Like
right.
using, for example, like using YouTube and stuff like that, like literally like just learning all the time. Like instead of watching TV, I watched Y Combinator videos
Mm,
after work every day, or like after, honestly, just it was videos. Like I constantly, and even to this day, like first thing in the morning, this morning I was listening to JP. Like it's either Y Combinator, Saster, or Jordan Peterson. It's like my music. It's
mm.
like listen to it all day long. So like I think that really, so keeping your mind constantly around that stuff, I think that was an advantage for sure.
Okay. Yeah, no, and I think that that's something that is often difficult, even just for me, because like, throughout the day, I'm like constantly working all, I'm every, my calendar's filled. I have to, I have emails, calls. It's a constant struggle. So when I do have that downtime, I often, that downtime, sometimes it could get out of whack. Like sometimes it could be, let me catch up on what I missed on ESPN, or let me turn on FS1. Sometimes we can get wrapped up in that. But I think that when you spend your time, like you said, listening to podcasts and, watching, Y Combinator videos, you often, your diet is more than what you eat, is what you consume on a day-to-day basis. So if you're consuming those things, you're able to, have a different perspective and approach to, not only what you're building, but just your outlook on life. I think sometimes, like, those little sacrifices, that individuals take to, okay, today I'm not gonna watch, whatever's on the news. I'm not gonna be on YouTube, watching, documentaries or what have you. I'm gonna take this time, to better myself, or to learn something new. And I think being a continuous learner is what separates, you know, you being good to being great. So I think that what you hit on is extremely important.
Appreciate it.
Absolutely. And so, excuse me. So this part of the show is called Wearing the Jersey. So it's essentially quick hitter questions. And you just answer these questions to whatever first thing that comes to mind. You just give me the answer that just pops in your head.
Got it. Let's do it.
Okay. So favorite sports memory of all time.
My senior year, my head football coach had never let me run the ball before,
Wow.
and we lost like all of our running backs, and because I was a pulling guard, the biggest
Okay.
guy on the team,
Yeah.
and he let me run the ball for the last 2 games of the season.
Mhm.
And like the second time I ever ran the ball, I ran for like a 60-yard touchdown,
Oh
and
wow.
it was sick.
60.
So that's definitely the best one. Yeah.
Favorite pair of sneakers all time.
The 70. I had a pair of 72 10s that,
Mm.
yeah, 100%.
Favorite jersey of all time.
I haven't had a ton of jerseys. I had a Russell Wilson jersey that I wore to like every party in college. I think that has to be my
That's the number
favorite one.
one. The number one. If you could work with anyone in the sports tech industry, who would you want to work with?
It's a great question. Sports tech.
Or just, let me rephrase that, in the sports industry in general. So it could be an athlete, it could be a just anyone in the sports realm, who would you want to work with?
Yeah, I would love to work with for a couple months the CEO of Huddle. Just have the opportunity to listen to that guy's mind go off. I mean, he built an absolute juggernaut and empire. Like, let me get a couple hours of that guy. Like, what'd you do? What do you do? So yeah, that would definitely be it.
That's a good one. Favorite book of all time?
Um, Favorite book is definitely Jordan Peterson, 12 Rules of Life.
If you could have dinner with three people, who would they be?
Dead or alive?
Dead or alive? Take your pick.
Um, let's see. I would have dinner with J. Cole, 100%.
Okay.
Um, I would have dinner with Obama for
Okay.
sure.
Okay.
Those are both alive. And then I would say my third one would be. It's a good question. Probably like Jackie Robinson or something like that. Some guy just changed the entire landscape of like history, and be like, "Did you know you did that?" So that'd be kind of cool.
Gotcha. And or I guess, which athlete best reflects your mindset as an entrepreneur, professional athlete currently, or it could be someone who's might have retired, but what athlete reflects your mindset?
I would say like an Aaron Donald kind of deal.
Okay. Okay.
Like mine is definitely like I'm not the smartest guy, but like I run through enough brick walls that eventually like we'll make it there. You know.
There you go.
Sometimes I run through brick walls and I don't need to run through brick walls, but we'll do it.
I like it. Um, who should I have on as a guest on the show that you recommend?
There's another guy from Indianapolis named Hunter Holly. He's a CEO of a company called Blueprint Stats,
Okay.
and he's been doing a startup. Him and I don't talk very often at all. I barely even know the guy,
Right.
but he started his company like around the same time I did in college, and so I've seen him grow. And he's from Indianapolis, awesome founder. He'd be great for the call.
Gotcha. And then yeah, that's pretty much it. But thank you so much, Andre, for coming on the show. Where can listeners and also viewers find you from a social media perspective?
Yeah, you can find us at All in Team Sports on Twitter, Instagram, and our website, allinteamsports.com. Honestly, just go to Twitter. That's where we spend most of our time. I know that's where a lot of people are on anyways. And then you can also find us at allinteamsports.com.
Absolutely. All right, Andre. Thank you so much, and best of luck to you moving forward.